the mysterious encounter of Carlos de los Santos. It was a clear, warm afternoon on May 3, 1975, when Carlos de los Santos, Apalper Pa-24 Comanche aircraft from Mexico City, a flight. An hour into the flight, cruising at 10,000 feet, left wing, hovering strange, metallic, wingless object. At first, he thought it might be another aircraft, but the way it moved was unnatural. It wasn't flying like a plane. It was just floating, maintaining. A second object appeared, this time on his right wing. Carlos' heart pounded. He was now surrounded. 3 gray, saucer-like objects. His aircraft was no longer alone in the sky. Then, suddenly, the object in front of him dropped below his plane. Carlos felt a jolt, a bump, as if something had struck the underside of his aircraft. Panic set in as he realized something was terribly wrong. His controls were no longer responding. He gripped the yoke, trying desperately to steer, but it felt as if the plane had a mind of its own. The aircraft began climbing rapidly, without his input, reaching 13,000 feet, then 14,000, then nearly 15,000 feet. At this altitude, in a non-pressurized cockpit, he knew that he could soon lose consciousness due to lack of oxygen. His breath became shallow, his chest tightened, his voice trembled as he reached for the radio. Mayday, Mayday. I have unidentified objects at my wingtips and beneath me. I am losing control of my aircraft. Back on the ground, Mexico City's air traffic controllers listened in disbelief. Carlos was a respected pilot, not someone given to wild stories or panic. Yet, his voice was filled with fear. Their radar operators confirmed that unidentified objects were indeed near his aircraft. Carlos felt like he was inside a force field. The plane's instruments twitched and malfunctioned. The yoke moved on its own, and he was completely at the mercy of these strange flying objects. He struggled to stay calm, praying that the nightmare would end. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, the UFOs veered off toward the Popocatépetl volcano, disappearing at lightning speed. Carlos suddenly regained control of his aircraft. His plane stabilized, the controls responded again, and he could finally breathe a sigh of relief, but the ordeal was not over. As he prepared to land at Mexico City International Airport, he realized his landing gear was not responding. No matter how many times he pulled the lever, the gear refused to deploy. Had the UFOs damaged his aircraft? Carlos circled the airport 10 times, desperately trying to figure out a solution. Then, in an act of sheer determination, he grabbed a screwdriver from his emergency kit. Manually forcing the gear lever, he managed to get the wheels to lock into place just in time for landing. He touched down safely, but the moment his wheels hit the ground, his mind swirled with questions. What had just happened? Had he really lost control of his aircraft to these unidentified flying objects? And if so, why? The story quickly became national news in Mexico. Reports of unidentified aerial phenomena UAPs were not uncommon, but this was different. This was a trained pilot, a man with everything to lose, coming forward with an incredible first-hand account. Mexican air traffic control confirmed tracking the unknown objects, lending credibility to his story. Unlike many UFO encounters, this wasn't just a personal testimony, it had hard evidence, the aftermath, a warning from the shadows. In the following weeks, Carlos was approached twice by mysterious men who warned him to stay silent. The first warning came when he was scheduled to give a television interview. Just before he was set to appear, a stranger confronted him and advised him not to speak about the incident. Carlos, shaken but defiant, ignored the warning, but then came the second encounter. He had been invited to meet renowned UFO investigator Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a former scientific consultant for the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book. Hynek had taken a keen interest in Carlos' case and a meeting was arranged. However, just before their meeting, Carlos was once again confronted, this time by two tall, pale-skinned men in dark suits. They told him, in no uncertain terms, that it would be best if he kept quiet. Fearing for his safety, Carlos stayed silent for many years, the unanswered questions. Even decades later, the Carlos de los Santos encounter remains one of the most compelling aviation UFO cases in history. The details are well documented, the radar confirmation is undeniable, and the physical effects on his aircraft suggest something beyond normal aviation phenomena. Theories about his experience vary. Some believe the UFOs were observing him, possibly conducting an experiment on his aircraft. His plane was caught in a type of energy field, temporarily disrupting its controls. The UFOs may have been using some form of magnetic propulsion, inadvertently affecting his aircraft. Skeptics argue that Carlos may have hallucinated the experience due to stress or lack of oxygen, but that theory doesn't explain the radar confirmations or the mechanical issues with his landing gear. What truly happened that day in the skies above Mexico remains a mystery. Conclusion: a legacy in UFO history. Carlos de los Santos survived his terrifying mid-air encounter, but the event changed his life forever. Though he eventually resumed speaking about the incident, the warnings he received only deepened the mystery. His case remains one of the most well-documented UFO encounters involving an aircraft, a chilling reminder that sometimes the unknown is closer than we think. Whether one believes in extraterrestrial visitors or not, one fact is undeniable: on that day in 1975, something unexplainable happened in the skies over Mexico. And Carlos de los Santos lived to tell the tale. Was it just an accident, or were they trying to communicate? The truth, as always, remains out there. The mysterious Kingman UFO crash of 1953, the desert stretched endlessly, bathed in the eerie glow of the setting sun. It was May 19, 1953, and a group of engineers, military personnel, and government scientists sat quietly on a bus as it rumbled down a desolate road, kicking up a storm of dust behind it. None of them spoke. They had been gathered with little explanation, given only a location and the strictest orders to follow protocol. As they traveled deeper into the rugged Arizona wilderness, some of the younger engineers exchanged uneasy glances. Why were they here? What was so urgent that required such secrecy? Finally, after a 3.5-hour drive from Phoenix, the bus came to a stop near the outskirts of Kingman, Arizona. The engineers peered through the grimy windows, their eyes adjusting to the dim glow of military floodlights illuminating the barren landscape. Standing at rigid attention, armed military police guarded the area, a clear sign that something out of the ordinary had taken place. Off the bus, single file, barked a soldier, his face expressionless. As they stepped onto the hot, dry earth, the engineers could feel the tension in the air. A sergeant led them forward, past a tight security perimeter, toward an object partially covered with tarps. When the coverings were pulled back, a collective gasp escaped their lips. Before them lay a perfectly intact, disc-shaped craft, roughly 40 feet in diameter. Its smooth metallic surface reflected the harsh artificial lights, yet there were no visible seams, rivets, or markings, nothing that suggested it had been built by human hands. The lead engineer, a seasoned aviation expert, ran his fingers lightly across the metal. It was cool to the touch, despite the desert heat. He knocked gently, expecting a hollow echo, but the material felt dense, almost unnatural. What is this made of? One of the men whispered. Another scientist, struggling to find an explanation, murmured, "Not steel, not aluminum. Something else." Then came the most unsettling revelation of all. Near the base of the craft, partially obscured by another tarp, lay 4 small bodies. A hush fell over the group. The figures were humanoid, but unmistakably not human. Their limbs were thin, almost delicate, their skin pale and slightly translucent under the harsh lights. Large, almond-shaped eyes remained fixed open, staring blankly at the night sky. For a moment, no one spoke. The lead scientist, who had spent years working on military aircraft, finally broke the silence. This changes everything. The transport to Area 51. Orders came swiftly. The craft and the bodies were to be moved immediately. Destination Groom Lake, Nevada, known today as Area 51. At the time, the site was little more than a barren stretch of desert, chosen for its isolation. It had been used for classified military projects, but after Kingman, everything changed. Under heavy guard, the disc-shaped object was carefully loaded onto a flatbed truck, covered once again with tarps and secured tightly. Armed convoys flanked the transport, ensuring that no prying eyes would witness what was being moved through the desert under the cover of darkness. The engineers were split into different vehicles, none of them allowed to talk freely about what they had seen. The atmosphere inside the convoy was heavy, a mixture of excitement, dread, and confusion. They had been brought here as experts, but what they had just encountered defied all logic. By the time they arrived at Groom Lake, new security protocols were already in place. Every individual involved in the retrieval was forced to sign strict non-disclosure agreements. Breaking their silence would mean prison or worse. The secrets of the Kingman craft. At Groom Lake, the craft was moved into a newly constructed underground facility. Government scientists, including experts in metallurgy, propulsion systems, and advanced engineering, were brought in under the highest level of secrecy. The goal? Reverse engineer the technology, but there was a problem. The craft had no visible engines, no exhaust ports, no control panels, nothing that resembled any known aircraft. It seemed designed to move without traditional propulsion, as if it bent gravity itself. Months turned into years, and progress was slow. Frustration mounted among the scientists. Whatever this craft was, it wasn't built for human use. J. Rod, the alleged survivor. Then came another revelation, one even more shocking than the craft itself. Rumors spread within the facility that one of the four beings had survived the crash. This survivor, later known by the code name J. Rod, was said to be housed in a classified underground chamber within Area 51. His appearance matched the body's recovered thin, with pale grayish skin and large black eyes. For years, certain government insiders have claimed that J. Rod cooperated with scientists, communicating through gestures and telepathic impressions. His primary task, according to these sources, was to assist in reverse engineering the downed spacecraft. Some claimed that he willingly worked alongside American scientists, while others insisted he was a reluctant participant, a captive with no other choice. The cover-up begins. Despite the magnitude of what had been discovered, the public never heard a word about Kingman. The military classified all information under top-secret clearance, and no official records of the event exist. Even those involved in the recovery mission were forced into silence. Many spoke of being visited by unidentified agents, warned never to discuss the events of that night. Some of these men, now old and retired, have come forward in recent years, their voices shaking as they recall the fear and awe they felt that night in 1953. Their descriptions remain eerily consistent. A seamless metallic disc, unlike anything man-made for non-human bodies, small and delicate, a cover-up that extended far beyond Kingman all the way to the highest levels of government. What really happened in Kingman? Decades later, the mystery remains. Was the Kingman crash the result of a UFO being brought down by the effects of nuclear testing? Or was it a deliberate encounter, an extraterrestrial presence responding to humanity's growing power? And if the stories of J. Rod's cooperation are true, what knowledge did he pass on? Some believe that modern advancements in aerospace technology, from stealth aircraft to anti-gravity experiments, originated from the Kingman craft. Others insist that the U.S. government still holds secrets from that night, locked away in the most classified archives of Area 51. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. Something crashed in the Arizona desert in 1953, and from that moment on, the world was never the same. The mysterious UFOs of Alaska, an unsettling encounter. The frigid Alaskan sky stretched endlessly before Captain Theo Chesley, a seasoned pilot with over 35 years of experience navigating the region's harsh conditions. He had seen it all: sudden snow squalls, relentless winds, and the deceptive stillness that often masked deadly storms. But on an unassuming autumn day in October 2019, it started as a routine flight. Chesley and his co-pilot were navigating their small aircraft near a remote volcano in Alaska, the snow-capped peak rising like a sentinel against the horizon. The air was crisp and clear, a perfect day for flying. As they cruised at an altitude of 30,000 feet, something caught Chesley's eye: a dark, circular object hovering motionless in the sky. At first, he thought it was a weather balloon, or perhaps an oddly shaped cloud. But as they drew closer, the object did not move, dissipate, or shift with the wind, something any experienced pilot would expect. Instead, it remained suspended perfectly still, almost as if it were watching them. I remember thinking to myself, "That's not normal," Chesley later recalled. "Clouds don't hold their shape like that." And whatever this was, it wasn't a plane. As they continued their approach, the situation took an even stranger turn. The dark sphere suddenly rotated, and before their very eyes, another smaller object emerged from the mountainside below. Chesley and his co-pilot exchanged uneasy glances. There were no known aircraft scheduled to be in that area, and certainly nothing that should have been coming out of the mountain itself. The second object, a glowing green orb, seemed to hover for a moment before swiftly shooting upward, straight into the dark sphere above. And then, almost as if in response, the larger object stretched, distorted, and wavered, like a mirage shifting in the desert heat. "That was the moment I knew," Chesley said, his voice steady but laced with lingering disbelief. "We weren't looking at anything man-made." A sudden jolt ran through the aircraft. Chesley instinctively gripped the controls. His co-pilot checked the instruments, frowning as numbers flickered erratically across the panel. Something was interfering with their autopilot system. Then, without warning, the plane veered 35 degrees off course, straight toward the volcano. Alarms blared inside the cockpit as Chesley scrambled to regain control. He disengaged the autopilot, wrestled the controls, and managed to straighten the aircraft's path. A brief sigh of relief filled the cabin. But then it happened again. Once more, their aircraft lurched sideways, its nose tilting toward the mountain, as if an invisible force was pulling it in. Chesley's heart pounded. He had flown thousands of hours, but never had he experienced an unseen force overriding his controls like this. Something was actively pulling them in. With every ounce of focus, Chesley disengaged the autopilot completely, gripping the controls tightly as he manually steered the plane away. The interference, whatever it was, stopped the moment he took full control. He didn't say a word for several moments. He didn't have to. His co-pilot's pale face mirrored his own thoughts. This was no malfunction. The aircraft climbed to a safer altitude, distancing itself from the anomaly below. Chesley risked one last glance at the mysterious dark sphere. It was gone. Vanished, as if it had never been there. By the time they landed, they knew better than to make any official report. Pilots who spoke about such things were often ridiculed, or worse, grounded. But Chesley couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see. Theories swirled in his mind. Was this some kind of military experiment? A natural phenomenon yet to be understood? Or was it something else entirely, something extraterrestrial? One thing was certain. The skies over Alaska held secrets that defied explanation, and Captain Chesley had just come dangerously close to uncovering one. The mysterious encounter of Japan Airlines Flight 1628. The sky over Alaska stretched vast and endless, a dark canvas speckled with stars. It was November 17, 1986, and Captain Kenju Terachi, an experienced pilot with over 10,000 hours of flight time, guided Japan Airlines Flight 1628 through Anchorage, Alaska. As Captain Terachi adjusted the aircraft's controls, a pair of strange lights appeared off to his left, military jets, possibly from Elmendorf Air Force Base. But these lights... He called out to his co-pilot, Takanori Tamafuji. Both men leaned forward, pressing their faces against the cockpit windows. The lights were getting brighter, moving closer. They weren't blinking like normal aircraft navigation lights. Instead, they glowed with an intense amber hue, flickering as if they were alive. Then, without warning, the lights darted directly in front of the plane, aligning themselves side by side. Now, Captain Terachi could see them clearly. They weren't just lights, there were two craft, oval-shaped, about the size of commercial jets. They pulsed with a strange energy, illuminating the cockpit like a rising sun piercing through the dawn fog. The captain's instinct screamed at him to move, to dodge, but his training held him still. He reached for the radio and called Anchorage Air Traffic Control ATC. "This is Japan Airlines 1628, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We have traffic in front of us. Very close. Do you have anything on radar?" There was a moment of static before Anchorage ATC responded. "Negative, JAL 1628. We show no other aircraft in your vicinity." Terachi frowned. That wasn't possible. The objects were right there, close enough that he could make out metallic surfaces and heat waves shimmering from their exteriors. The glowing craft danced erratically, shifting positions in an almost playful manner. It was as if they were observing the plane, testing it. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the objects shot upward, disappearing from view. For a brief moment, silence filled the cockpit, and then a shadow loomed overhead, a massive presence in the sky. Tamafuji gasped. "Captain, look." Above them, a massive dark shape materialized, dwarfing their jumbo jet like a whale swimming above a minnow. It was enormous. Terachi later estimated it to be as large as 2 aircraft carriers. Unlike the smaller craft, this one emitted no bright lights. It was a solid, silent, looming presence, and it was following them. The captain's heart pounded in his chest. Was this the mothership? Again, he called Anchorage ATC. This time, his voice was more urgent. "We now have a very large object directly behind us on the ground." The controllers checked the radar again. This time, they saw it. A large unidentified target appeared on radar, moving exactly in sync with Flight 1628. The controllers at Anchorage contacted NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, which confirmed the object was there. But they had no idea what it was. "Do you wish to change course?" ATC asked. Captain Terachi didn't hesitate. "Affirmative." He veered the plane sharply to the right, a maneuver that should have shaken off any normal aircraft. But the massive object matched their movement perfectly, staying right behind them. Next, Anchorage ATC instructed a United Airlines flight nearby to alter course and visually confirm what was following JAL 1628. The pilots agreed, but before they could get close enough, the UFO vanished, a silent cover-up. JAL 1628 landed safely in Anchorage, but for Captain Terachi, the nightmare was far from over. He and his crew were immediately interrogated by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. At first, FAA officials seemed genuinely interested. They reviewed radar data, radio transcripts, and the pilot's testimony. But then something strange happened. John Callahan, who was the FAA's chief of accidents and investigations at the time, later revealed that the case was quickly classified. A high-level meeting was called in Washington, D.C. Representatives from the CIA, FBI, and even the Reagan White House attended. Callahan presented the evidence: the radar records, the cockpit conversations, the pilot reports. He described how NORAD had tracked the object. When the meeting ended, a CIA agent stood up and said, "This meeting never happened. We're confiscating all materials." The officials collected all evidence and instructed everyone in the room to forget what they had seen. Fortunately, Callahan had kept a copy of the radar data. Years later, after retiring from the FAA, he revealed the story to the public: Captain Tarachi's punishment. Meanwhile, Captain Tarachi faced consequences of his own. A month after the encounter, he gave an interview to Kyodo News, a Japanese media outlet. He openly stated that he believed the UFOs were extraterrestrial in origin. Shortly after, Japan Airlines removed him from active flight duty. He was reassigned to a desk job, a common tactic used to discredit pilots who spoke about UFOs. It wasn't until years later that JAL reinstated him as a pilot, but the damage had been done. His career would never be the same, the case that won't disappear. The Japan Airlines Flight 1628 case remains one of the most well-documented UFO encounters in aviation history. Unlike many sightings, this one had multiple eyewitnesses, the entire flight crew, radar confirmation from both FAA and NORAD, recorded communications between the pilot and air traffic control, a government cover-up attempt. Yet, despite all this, the incident faded from public view, buried under skepticism and secrecy. Even today, the question lingers: what did Captain Tarachi and his crew really see over Alaska that night? Was it an advanced military craft, a classified experiment, or something not of this earth? One thing remains certain: someone, somewhere, didn't want the world to know. The lost origins of the Aztecs. Did ancient aliens shape Teotihuacan? Beneath the sprawling modern metropolis of Mexico City, echoes of an ancient world linger. Stone temples, towering pyramids, and hidden passageways whisper stories of a lost civilization, one whose true origins remain shrouded in mystery. Long before the Spanish arrived, before the rise of the Aztec Empire, there was Teotihuacan, the city of the gods. But who built it? How did such an advanced civilization emerge seemingly overnight? And could the myths of celestial visitors hold the key to understanding this ancient enigma? For centuries, archaeologists have puzzled over Teotihuacan's sudden rise and unexplained sophistication. While most ancient cities show gradual development, small villages evolving into towns, then cities Teotihuacan appears to have been built all at once, as if its architects had knowledge far beyond their time. The city was meticulously planned, with broad avenues, pyramids aligned with celestial bodies, and a complex underground tunnel system that defied conventional understanding. According to Aztec legend, Teotihuacan was not of human origin. Instead, it was said to be the place where the gods gathered to create the world itself. The myths speak of Chicamoztoc, the place of the 7 caves, where the first people emerged, guided by celestial beings who descended from the heavens. For centuries, historians dismissed this as mere mythology until recent discoveries changed everything. The hidden chamber beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. In 2017, a team of researchers made a shocking discovery beneath Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun, the largest structure in the city. Using advanced ground-penetrating radar, they uncovered a vast underground cave, eerily resembling the descriptions of Chicamoztoc in Aztec legend. The chamber, with its 7 branching tunnels, mirrored the ancient tales of the place where humanity was created. Could this cave be the very site where the Aztecs believed they had originated? If so, why was it hidden beneath a pyramid built centuries before the Aztecs arrived? Even more puzzling, scientists discovered traces of liquid mercury deep inside tunnels beneath another major structure, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. In Mesoamerican culture, mercury was believed to represent the underworld and was associated with divine power. But liquid mercury is rare in nature and highly toxic. Why would the people of Teotihuacan have had access to such a substance? Some researchers began to speculate. What if the gods of Teotihuacan were not divine beings, but extraterrestrial visitors? The strange arrival of the sky gods. One of the most fascinating and bizarre accounts of Teotihuacan's origins comes from a 16th century Spanish chronicler, Jeronimo de Mendieta. He recorded an ancient Aztec tale describing the arrival of celestial beings in a giant flint knife that descended from the sky. The ground shook violently as the object landed, and from within, 1,600 beings emerged. These beings, the story claimed, were responsible for teaching early Mesoamericans advanced knowledge, mathematics, astronomy, architecture. They guided them in building great cities, including Teotihuacan. The description of the flint knife falling from the sky bears a striking resemblance to modern depictions of UFOs landing. While many dismiss this as mere folklore, some researchers argue that ancient people often interpreted technological events using the language of their time. To them, a massive metallic craft might have looked like a celestial blade, cutting through the heavens. And the idea of gods descending from the sky? It's a common theme across many ancient cultures, from the Sumerians to the Egyptians to the Hopi tribes of North America. Could the founders of Teotihuacan have been influenced by beings not of this world? Anomalies in architecture and astronomy. Beyond mythology, the layout and design of Teotihuacan raise even more questions. Unlike other ancient cities, which often grew chaotically, Teotihuacan was precisely engineered. The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent are arranged in a pattern that mirrors the Orion constellation, a feature found in the pyramids of Egypt as well. The city also incorporates advanced mathematical knowledge. The main road, Avenue of the Dead, is aligned exactly 5 east of true north, a level of precision that modern engineers find astonishing for a civilization that supposedly lacked advanced tools. Even more strangely, researchers have found that the dimensions of the pyramids match ratios seen in structures around the world, including the Great Pyramid of Giza. Some believe this hints at a lost, global knowledge, one that ancient civilizations might have inherited from a shared source. What if that source was not from Earth? The mysterious abandonment of Teotihuacan. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is why Teotihuacan was abandoned. At its height around 500 AD, the city was home to over 100,000 people, one of the largest urban centers in the world at the time. Yet, around the 7th or 8th century, it was suddenly deserted. There are no signs of invasion or natural disaster. Instead, evidence suggests that parts of the city were deliberately burned not by outsiders, but by its own inhabitants. Why would a thriving civilization turn on itself and destroy its own temples? Some researchers suggest that an internal rebellion led to the fall of Teotihuacan. Others believe that a cataclysmic event, possibly linked to the mysterious sky gods, forced the inhabitants to flee. One of the strangest pieces of evidence is found in Aztec records. When the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico centuries later, they discovered Teotihuacan's ruins and were awestruck. They believed it was a city built by the gods themselves, not by humans. This suggests that even by the time of the Aztecs, the true origins of Teotihuacan had already been lost to history. If the city had been abandoned because of contact with extraterrestrial beings, would its new inhabitants have interpreted the event as the departure of the gods? Final thoughts. Were the gods of Teotihuacan visitors from the stars? The ruins of Teotihuacan still hold countless secrets. Scientists continue to uncover hidden chambers, mysterious substances, and cosmic alignments that hint at something far beyond what traditional history tells us. The myths of the Aztecs, the anomalies in the architecture, and the unexplained abandonment of the city all raise the same question. Was Teotihuacan just an advanced human civilization, or was it something more? Perhaps long ago, beings from beyond our world descended from the stars, guiding early humans in ways we still struggle to understand. If so, their footprints remain not just in legend, but in the stone foundations of a lost city where the gods once walked. Are we truly alone? For decades, pilots, military officials, and government agencies have encountered unexplainable aerial phenomena, yet time and real accounts, back-up eyewitness testimonies, radar data, and even government investigations. But despite all nothing to see here, but how long can these mysteries be ignored? From the terrifying encounter of Carlos de los Santos, massive UFO that shadowed a Japan Airlines flight over Alaska, far beyond our understanding, is in. These objects don't behave like any known human technology. They move at impossible speeds, defy our laws of physics, interact with our aircraft, even taking control of them. Whispers of government cover-ups, but what? Across the globe, ancient cultures recorded stories of visitors descending from the sky, giant flint knife that fell from the heavens. In the heart of Teotihuacan, a cave with 7 chambers eerily similar to the mythical birthplace of the Aztecs sits beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. Were these simply legends, or could they be accounts of actual extraterrestrial contact? If the past has taught us anything, it's that truth is often stranger than fiction. So, what does all of this mean? Are we being watched, guided, or is there a greater force at play, shaping our history and our future? While skeptics may laugh, the evidence continues to grow, and more people from scientists to government officials are starting to take the UFO phenomenon seriously. One thing is certain: the sky holds more secrets than we ever imagined. The question is, are you ready to believe?